All of the wealth and the prosperity that they have is stolen. It's all the result of pillage and exploitation. It's the result of greed and vicious oppression. And because this is so, they're the loudest voices preaching about human rights and freedom. It's all deflection, purely deflection. When you tell them that Muslim civilization is superior, they'll say, well, why are so many Muslim countries poor then? Or they'll say, we invented all the technology of the modern world. Well, why does everyone want to come to the West? Why does everyone want to immigrate to the West if we're so bad, etc., etc.? None of these are arguments for genuine civilizational authority or supremacy. None of these are moral arguments. None of these are arguments that substantiate superior Western values. They're all materialistic arguments. Again, because they have no understanding of how to properly assign value. They don't understand what makes a civilization civilized. And the answer to all of these arguments, all of their arguments, the answer is the same to every one of those arguments. The answer is Western brutal violence and oppression. They imagine that material value equates to moral value. If our violence and savagery makes us richer than you, then it makes our civilization better. No, it just makes your so-called civilization savage and violent. And it means that you loot and pillage better than actually civilized nations, because civilized nations don't.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope wherever you're watching, you're having a great time. Now, there is this thing that is called investment imperialism, where foreign countries use their FDI, the foreign direct investments, as a tool for control of different countries. This is akin to present-day colonization, where foreign countries invest in a different nation, they go to different sectors and capture them and get profit, but also have some control over that sector in the countries where they have invested. This is the topic that Shahid Bolsen is talking about in the clip that I'm going to play for you next. He has mastered the art of explaining how Western nations have been subjugating the nations within the global South. Africa, for example, has been used as the place where almost every other country comes to fight for their space and fight for their control. And he says that the reason why most Western nations do not want China to invest anywhere is because they know that this is the strategy that they have used over the years to take control of certain important sectors within different nations. Take a listen to the view of Shahid Bolsen. I shall come back in the end with my commentaries.
I mean, either you understand it or you don't understand it. The coercive, controlling power that is part and parcel of investment that comes along, that accompanies investment. I mean, I think it's strange to not understand this. It's kind of a disaster, frankly, if you don't understand this, because it means that you don't understand anything about colonization. You know, neither traditional colonization nor the current techniques that are being used against the global South. I mean, if you don't comprehend the power of money, I'm not sure what version of reality you're living in, but it's not one that can enable you ever to intelligently discuss or intelligently analyze the world that the rest of us live in if you don't understand how money works with relation to power. Because look, when any country invests in another country, say $1 billion or 10 billion or what have you, they invest in this sector or they invest in that sector. Well, that's not a gift. It's not charity. It's investment. It's buying, essentially. It's purchasing a part of that sector of your economy. And the point of investment is to get more money back than you invested. You invest in order to get a return on your investment. So FDI, foreign investment, foreign direct investment, can actually end up resulting in a net outflow of capital from the recipient country. Not to mention that through this investment, a company or a country can undermine local companies. They can boost the company that they invested in to where it outperforms all of the others and expands its domestic market share. And then it becomes dominant in its sector, with the profits then essentially being extracted from the domestic economy into the economy or into the accounts of the foreign investors. That's how it works. All of this is quite basic, and this has been a major tactic by the West for subjugating and dominating the countries of the global South. FDI, foreign direct investment, has been like a syringe that they tell you is an injection of medicine, but it's actually used to draw blood. Everyone understands this, or at least everyone should understand this. The West certainly understands it, and that's why they view Chinese investment anywhere in the world as a threat to their influence. Because it is. It is a threat to their influence because they know how investment works. It gives a country influence. So again, either you understand this or you don't. And if you understand it, then you will also understand that this is how it works for everyone, not just Westerners, not just Americans, not just British, not just Europeans, not just white people. And it doesn't only work for Russians, and it doesn't only work for Chinese. This is just how it works, period. But it seems like there's some people who seem to think that it doesn't work for Arabs. Somehow it doesn't work that way for Arabs. Mostly other Arabs and other Muslims think that way. There seems to be an irrational inferiority complex and an outdated, but for some reason dearly held belief that our countries can never be influential, that our leaders can never operate with independence and sovereignty. They can't believe that the power and influence of money, the coercive and controlling power of investment, follows the same principle when Arabs do it, when Muslims do it. Particularly, they can't believe that it operates according to the same principles when Arabs do it in relation to the West. And they think it's absolutely unthinkable that it could ever work that way in relation to Israel. In this way of thinking, the West, Europe, the United States, the UK, etc., they're historic colonizers. The historic colonizers of the Muslims and the Arabs in the global South. They think that apparently they're just simply too powerful. They're too superior. They're too clever. They're too rich to ever be subject to the same tactics that they've used on us. Well, no. But in their minds, Israel, for example, is apparently some sort of weird anomaly. And it's not subject to the same rules of geopolitics and economics as any other country. They think it's immune. It defies the physics of market forces. Israel is magical somehow in their mind, in their thinking. It's mythical. But the practitioners of economic or investment colonialism, they know perfectly well that it works no matter who's doing it. They don't dismiss the economic power of the GCC. And they don't dismiss how their investments are expanding their sphere of influence, even into their own Western countries. That's why you see article after article expressing concern over Arab investment in the UK and in Europe and so on. And why, in fact, these investments are, in reality, impacting Western policies vis-a-vis the Gulf, vis-a-vis the Khalij. That's happening. That's a reality. But I don't know. Some people still have it in their head that investment is somehow a display of friendship. I don't know if you've ever been in business. I mean, there are ways that investment can be carried out so that it's less hostile or less malicious than others. I mean, it can be done in ways that do not overtly equate to intrusion, invasion, and economic occupation. Ways that can carry varying degrees of local benefit. And that will depend on the intentions of the investors themselves. And it will depend on the terms and conditions that are set by the recipients. But at the end of the day, what you are always talking about is penetration and expansion of foreign influence in your country, which inevitably and unavoidably changes the priorities and the position of your government and of your elites towards the investing country and towards their own populations as well, because now their own interests include the interests of their investors, the priorities of their investors, and so on. I mean, it feels very rudimentary to even have to explain this, to be honest. I mean, look, the GCC countries, some examples of their investment in Europe. The Qatar Investment Authority, the QIA, they invested 300 million euros in Spain's banks, their troubled savings banks, basically a bailout. $1 billion of investment in a joint fund focused on Greek small to medium-sized enterprises. The Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund, they started a partnership in France to the tune of 300 million euros, also for small and medium-sized enterprises. An acquisition of 5% of Italy's largest bank in 2017. Kuwait, their investment fund, their sovereign wealth fund, 75% of their investments, 75% of all of the investments from Kuwait are in Europe and North America. That's a massive amount of money that they're pumping into those economies and getting something back. These investments have significantly contributed to the economic ties between the GCC and Europe, particularly in the areas of finance, in the area of infrastructure and energy. GCC firms have £15.7 billion pounds invested in the UK as of 4 years ago. There are around 600 GCC-owned businesses in the UK, supporting something like 25,000 jobs. And that number tripled in just 10 years. These investments are strategic, and even the West knows it. They know that it's strategic, but they can't do anything about it because they need the money. Because as I've said, and I've explained many, many times, they have already subjugated their own countries to the OCGFC, to the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. They've subjugated themselves to people who only care about revenue, who only care about profits and dividends. That's given a tremendous advantage to any Gulf state, to any Muslim country, or to any country at all that possesses significant sovereign wealth funds and possesses the intelligence to employ their capital strategically. As I've said several times, there's simply no reason for anyone to think that their approach to Israel would be any different than their approach to Europe and their approach to the United States. And there's no reason to think that it would have different results. GCC countries have expanded their influence and their control in the West, across the Middle East, across North Africa, and in fact across the entire continent of Africa, by means of investment. This is all part of a strategy that recognizes the reality of the shift of the global economy to the South and to the East, and the changing balance of power as a result of that. This changing balance of power is also leading to the subjugation and the irrelevance of Europe. This changes the whole global dynamics, power dynamics. And the genocide in Gaza is destroying Israel economically. How do you think that plays into this strategy of expanding their influence? The government spending of the Israeli government has increased by at least 40% since October 7th, while their revenues have decreased significantly. Their budget deficit has tripled since October 7th of last year. You know, the total state budget of Israel is only $160 billion, and roughly half of their GDP is government spending. Well, they're entering a bottomless debt cycle this way. You know, their most successful sectors, the high-tech sector and the R&D sector, they barely pay any taxes. And a massive proportion of the companies in those sectors are actually not even Israeli companies, but American companies and other Western companies. Did you know that foreign investment into the tech sector in Israel has plummeted since October 7th from $1 billion to just $300 million? And dual citizen Israelis have been fleeing from that country by their hundreds of thousands for 9 months. And between that and the government calling in reservists, well, their workforce is completely depleted. Tens of thousands of foreign workers have left the country as well. And they were mostly doing jobs that Israelis don't even want to do themselves anyway. So who's going to do those jobs now? I'm telling you, you have to start looking at the cold hard facts if you want to consider geopolitical strategy. Israel is not sustainable, and it never was. And they're coming to the end of the road for Zionism. It's the end of the road for Zionism. So many sectors, whole chunks of their economy, wallahi, are going to be up for grabs. You know, Israel has always been a dependency of the United States. Everyone knows that. But the key point here is that it is a dependency. It is a dependent economy. After 80 years, it has still never achieved any meaningful economic independence. It's a complete failure as a country. And if you don't understand how investment works, how investment does not equal love and friendship and upliftment, no, it's not charity, it's not kindness. If you don't understand that, then you won't understand how investment in that failed economy that failed Israeli economy, that failed country, well, that's the easiest and the most effective strategy imaginable for domination. Again, the practitioners of economic domination understand this very well. Like I said, that's why Western countries are fearful of investment from the Khalij, from the Arab states, and Chinese investment, because they know perfectly well what investment means. They know it means influence, because that's the way they've always used investment. So they know how it works. Look, sovereignty in the real world today belongs to the OCGFC. It belongs to the owners and controllers of global financialized capital, not to states, not to governments. And Israel is no different. Zionism is an obstacle, just like any ideologically driven government is an obstacle. So the OCGFC are at war with any ideology that interferes with their sovereignty, with their authority, which is why there's a Cold War going on right now between the OCGFC and the neocons, between the OCGFC and any nationalists, and yes, between them and the Zionists. They want every government to sell off state assets. They want to reduce the public sector as much as possible. They want everything to be privatized in every country. They want everything to be put on the auction block. Oh yes, in my opinion, the genocide in Gaza is going to make Israel a helpless target of neoliberal dismantling. The public sector in Israel accounts for a huge portion of their economy, from telecommunications to transport to energy to healthcare, ports and airports, water and waste management, on and on and on. Not to mention land development, real estate, property, and so on. All of these things are going to be up on the auction block. They're going to be all on the auction block of privatization. And whoever buys them buys control, buys influence. Well, Israel is going to be, like I said, spiraling into a whirlpool of debt. And someone can even buy that debt. And if they buy that debt, again, they buy control. You have to start thinking with your mind instead of just feeling with your heart if you want to defeat your enemy. Because listen, if you don't understand what I've been saying, then you've never understood how your enemy defeated you in the first place. And you don't understand the situation that you're in right now. Because look, this isn't the 1700s or the 1800s. Colonization today, empire building today, imperialism today is achieved primarily through economic means, by means of investment and by means of debt. They colonize your market. They colonize your economy. You know how they say that the FBI is the domestic instrument of control in the United States, and that the CIA is their instrument of foreign control? No, the FBI deals with you at home in America, but FDI deals with everyone outside of America, foreign direct investment. That's how they dominate. Well, again, anyone who has the money can do the same thing. We can do with our money to you what you've been doing with your money to us. And that means that the Arabs, the Muslims, the Khalij can do the same thing to Israel. They can do the same thing to Israel what they've been doing to Egypt and what they've been doing across the region. They want to dominate and they want to control and they want to spread their sphere of influence. And not only is Israel not excluded from that plan, in my opinion, it's absolutely key to that plan. And with every passing day, Israel becomes even more and more vulnerable to economic conquest. I'm telling you, this is not only feasible, it's inevitable. Look, Israel is a colony. It's a settler colony, a colonialist project. Well, a colonialist project is supposed to generate money for the colonizing power, not drain money from it. Israel was a good investment in the past, you know, in the post-World War II era, when the U.S. economy was run exclusively on the basis of the military-industrial complex, and when nationalism still ruled the day, before the rise of multinational corporate power, which led then to the rise of a-national private sector elites in the form of the OCGFC. And it still worked when there was the baby boomers and so on, when the West was still producing consumers and workers at above replacement rates. Well, that's all changed. So today that system, the whole post-World War II system, is obsolete. Just using Israel to funnel American tax dollars to American weapons companies is not the same thing as Israel generating revenue for America. No. Israel is just a pretext for moving American money from one place to another, from the American people's pockets into American companies' accounts. That's not bringing new money into the American economy. Well, that's what a colony is supposed to do, and Israel's not doing it. It's supposed to extract wealth and resources from the colonized and deliver them to the colonizing power. Israel doesn't do that. They just take. And in terms of having a pretext for funneling tax money into the American weapons sector, well, in my opinion, over the next decade or so, at least, the whole continent of Europe is going to provide that pretext. You know, it shouldn't seem strange to you that the owners and controllers of global financialized capital are abandoning Zionism and are abandoning Israel. I mean, this is happening after and because they have already abandoned the West. They've already abandoned nationalism and loyalty to their own countries. And they've done that out of a conviction in the internal logic of their class. What's good for business is the highest principle. And everything else just falls by the wayside. So why shouldn't Zionism? Why shouldn't Israel? They already threw Europe under the bus. I don't blame anyone if the world is changing too fast for you to keep up. But I'm trying to tell you about how things have changed and how things are changing. Because to be honest, I hear some opinions online that sound like something that might have been an informed opinion 30 years ago, but it's completely out of touch with reality today. Listen, the way you thought that the world worked even 10 years ago is out of date in 2024. I would even say that there have been so many changes that have happened just since the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict, that if you have an opinion that is based on how power dynamics were just 3 years ago, you might as well be talking about the Warsaw Pact. You need to catch up. Now, you know, someone asked me I think it was in the comment section. It was a good question. He asked me, isn't what the Saudis are doing and what the UAE is doing, isn't that just another form of imperialism? Because, you know, I've talked about how these countries, the Gulf countries, UAE and Saudi Arabia and so on, they're using their economic power, and the UAE specifically is using even violent power in places like Sudan. But they're using their power to spread their influence and control across the region. And they've bought massive influence in Egypt, in Jordan, in Lebanon, and they want to do it in Syria, which is one of the things that's behind the normalization with Bashar al-Assad. And they've spread their influence across North Africa and East Africa and beyond, even deeper into Africa, and even all the way to Indonesia and Malaysia. And they're doing it by means similar to, and sometimes in conjunction with, the International Monetary Fund. So isn't that imperialism, and isn't that bad? But look, we're talking about lands that were historically an integrated Muslim empire already, that got broken down, that got broken apart and divided by Western imperialism and colonization. So, I mean, is that imperialism to revive cohesion between formerly cohesive countries and peoples, between Muslim lands? I don't think so. I don't think that Muslims putting something back together that colonization broke apart is the same thing as imperialism. No, it's just the next phase in undoing the damage that Western imperialism caused to our parts of the world. And yes, I'll say it again, in my opinion, this is going to include undoing the damage caused by Zionist colonization, which has always been just another facet of Western imperialism. Just watch, like I said, what everyone calls normalization, if you can lift your head above the fray of rhetoric and emotion, what that's actually going to mean is economic conquest of Israel. And Israel's going to have to abandon Zionism, and they're going to have to abandon Jewish supremacy, which will just mean that those people in Israel who won't abandon Jewish supremacy, then they'll have to abandon Israel, and they'll just have to go home. But the way that things are going and the way things are likely to go, I don't think they're going to find much of a welcome when they go back home either. Look, contrary to popular opinion, the OCGFC are not Zionists. They're not any kind of nationalist, except in terms of the fact that the rich are a nation unto themselves. And that's the only nation they care about, their own class. That's the only nation they care about. Their support for Israel in the past has nothing to do with Zionism, has nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with any ideology other than self-interest. But the myths of Zionism have been useful for providing some sort of non-materialistic, non-selfish rationale for their support of Israel. So all of the myths and the rhetoric of Zionism, all the propaganda, all of that has been deliberately permeated throughout the society because it allowed the genuinely and deeply anti-Jewish West to camouflage their actual hatred of Jews as support for a Jewish homeland far away from them. But this being the case, the OCGFC, pivoting away from Israel and the necessity of abandoning Zionism means that all of the rank and file Western Christian Zionists and all these types, all of them are going to need some way to rationalize to themselves how and why they don't support Israel anymore. And that's going to be because, you know, Israel and AIPAC and the Jews have just been too criminal and too inhuman and have bullied pure-hearted America and the enlightened West into doing whatever the Jews told them to do. That's what they'll use. They'll revert to their historically embedded hatred of Jews as a way to convince themselves of their own innocence. They'll distance themselves from Israel and from Zionism and claim to have been manipulated and hypnotized by AIPAC because they can't take responsibility or accountability for their own actions. And the classic Western anti-Jewish hatred will rear its head blatantly in the West once again. So the Jews will ultimately recognize that the only place that they're safe is going to be with the only people who ever did grant them safety, and that's the Muslims. And by the time that happens, the Muslims and the Arabs will have already transformed so-called Israel into a regional dependency. There is no scenario in which Zionism has a future. And there's no scenario in which Israel does not integrate into the region and revert to being what the land always was, a Muslim and Arab majority country with a Jewish minority. That's the only future. That's the only future. And everyone who matters, everyone who has real influence, everyone who pushes the levers of long-term policy, everyone who's navigating and steering the shift of the global economy to the global south, everyone can see this fact. And the Muslim lands across Africa, through the Middle East, at least all the way up to Turkey, are going to very likely form a cohesive community of nations. And that community of nations is going to become the center of the world, economically, politically, culturally, and civilizationally. Whether that process happens through hardship and difficulty or it's easy, it doesn't matter. That is the trajectory, inshallah bi'idhnillah. That's the way it's going to go. And in my opinion, any effort to oppose this, to hinder this, or to derail it, whether those efforts are made by die-hard neocons in Washington or by colonizer collaborators among the Muslims who try to sow discord in our countries, I think that any such efforts are going to be overruled and are going to be overwhelmed by the a-national OCGFC. Now, their intention has nothing to do with supporting Islam, and they have no interest in supporting Muslims. That's not their intention. Their intention is what it always is, which is money and power. But a stable and prosperous Muslim world, an organized and cohesive Muslim world, just makes sense. It's good for business. Once this is achieved, well, the preeminence of Islam will be beneficial for the whole planet. And I think that humanity will enter into one of the most vibrant and transformative periods in human history. And the whole era of Western domination will be something that people read about in disbelief at the cruelty and the crassness and the savagery. It'll be like the world was in some kind of a fugue state for centuries. Temporarily insane. Like I've said many, many times, as Muslims, you should analyze current events, analyze the time that you're living in by identifying where this period sits in the timeline and where the events that you see fit into the story of the eventual and inevitable victory of Islam. Because I can see it very clearly. Because as analysts, as Muslim analysts of geopolitics, current affairs, what have you, we're in a very unique position, a very advantaged position, because we already know how the story ends. We're watching the movie after seeing the spoilers. So all we have to do is identify how what we are living through fits into the timeline that leads to the finale that we already know is going to happen.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I believe you've heard what Shahid Bolsen has to say about investment imperialism and how it has been used to capture many countries in the global south. He explains even why Western nations are very skeptical when China starts any investment anywhere in the world. In fact, you see that even the United States is trying to control the level of trade that it has with China because China has captured an aspect of the United States that America cannot survive without. So it really tells you how this system has been used over the years to control African nations and to control other countries in the global south. And I believe that a time has come for us to discuss the true issues that need to be discussed when it comes to analyzing the impact of this kind of foreign direct investments that are always done in our countries, especially in Africa. Shahid Bolsen describes investment imperialism as a sophisticated evolution of colonial domination, where Western powers, particularly through their multinational corporations and financial institutions, exert control over nations in the global south without overt military occupation of the past. Instead of direct conquest, this strategy relies on economic leverage, positioning investment as a tool of extraction rather than genuine development. Bolsen argues that these investments function like a syringe, injecting just enough capital to access resources while siphoning out far greater value in profits, raw materials, and economic sovereignty. This approach allows Western entities to maintain influence by embedding themselves in the host countries' economies, often through loans from institutions like the IMF and World Bank that come with stringent conditions favoring foreign interest. In essence, it transforms independent nations into perpetual debtors, ensuring their policies align with the agenda of global capital rather than their own people's needs. Historically, Bolsen connects investment imperialism to the decline of traditional colonialism after World War II, when direct rule became politically untenable due to independence movements and global scrutiny. Western nations adapted by shifting to neoliberal policies that promote privatization, deregulation, and open markets, effectively handing over state assets and essential services to private corporations. This pivot, as Bolsen explains, was not a retreat from imperialism, but a rebranding, where military force is reserved for extreme cases and economic mechanisms become the primary means of subjugation. The global south, rich in resources but often lacking capital, becomes prime target for these investments, which promised infrastructure and growth but deliver dependency. By controlling key sectors like mining, agriculture, and energy, Western investors ensure a steady outflow of wealth, perpetuating underdevelopment while enriching shareholders abroad. At its core, investment imperialism operates through a web of debt and contractual obligations that strip countries of autonomy. Bolsen highlights how loans and foreign direct investments are structured to prioritize returns for investors over local benefits, often requiring governments to privatize public utilities or natural resources. For instance, multinational corporations gain concessions that allow them to exploit minerals or oil with minimal taxes or regulations, while the host nation shoulders the environmental and social costs. If a country resists or attempts economic nationalism, such as nationalizing industries, the response is swift capital flight, sanctions, or orchestrated instability, all enforced by the collective power of global financialized capital. This system, Bolsen notes, is national, transcending individual Western states and operates as a borderless empire driven by profit motives where corporations wield more influence than governments. The impact on global south are profound and multifaceted, fostering cycles of poverty and instability that Bolsen attributes directly to this imperial strategy. Resources are extracted en masse, leaving behind polluted lands, displaced communities, and economies skewed towards export rather than self-sufficiency. Leaders in these nations are often co-opted through bribes or the allure of personal gain, prioritizing foreign investment demands over domestic welfare, which erodes public trust and fuels corruption. Bolsen emphasizes that this form of imperialism masks itself as partnership or aid, using rhetoric of development to justify exploitation, but it ultimately widens inequality gaps. The people suffer from inadequate infrastructure, healthcare, and education, as funds are diverted to debt servicing or profit repatriation, trapping generations in neocolonial quagmire. Ultimately, Bolsen views investment imperialism as the preferred Western strategy because it is cost effective, deniable, and sustainable in a multipolar world where outright aggression invites backlash. By controlling the global economy rules through trade agreements, intellectual property laws, and financial dominance, Western powers ensure the global South remains a supplier of cheap labor and raw materials, never a competitor. This approach adapts to emerging blocs like BRICS by integrating them into the same extractive framework, diluting their potential for true independence. Bolsen calls for awareness and resistance through economic sovereignty, urging global South nations to negotiate from strength, build alternative alliances, and reclaim their resources to break free from the insidious control. So, the control of Western nations on countries in the global south is very evident in almost every aspect. We have seen many countries being given sanctions because of this economic imperialism or investment imperialism, as Shahid Bolsen puts it. We have seen America take leverage into nations and telling them that we will not be trading with you because you are doing this or you are doing that, and that is against our wish and our interest. So instead of coming with military power as the way of controlling different nations, they use trade and investment as the basis within which they can exert and implement their agenda in different countries each and every day. Share your thoughts down in the comment section, and if watching us for the first time, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share. Thank you. Let's meet on the next one.